Welcome, everyone. I'm Sue Landay. This is Show and Share, and I'm joined today by Amy Climer, who I've been working with for it's probably a dozen or more years now, I'm guessing. We Trainers Warehouse has sold Amy's Climer decks for many years. She now has two versions of that. The one she just held up, and her version two, her second set. Um, Amy has been a consultant and a trainer and has focused on creativity and working with teams for a lot of her career. She has worked with clients like the Mayo Clinic, Fox Sports, Department of Homeland Security. She's been a TEDx speaker. And although Amy has illustrated all of those images on those cards herself, she promises that we don't need to be artists to be creative, as we talked about a little bit at the start of our session here. So feel free to add anything more, Amy, but I'm going to hand it over to you because you're an expert at all of this, and I'm happy to have you with us today.
Thank you so much, Sue. It's so good to be here. Hi, everyone. I would love to know. Here's first of all what we're going to do. We're going to spend some time looking at deliberate creativity, and really specifically deliberate creative teams. And I have this background in team development, team building, and I spend a lot of time working with teams and organizations, teaching them how to be more innovative, like Sue said. And what I have found is that over the last 20 years is there's a lot of myths and misunderstandings around creativity. We were talking a little bit about that as people were coming in, and that it's not about being artistic, even though I do like doing art. I don't that it they're not the same. And it's actually been a very long journey for me to get comfortable doing art because, like many of you, I had some kind of negative messages growing up around art. Well, I should say mixed messages, some positive, some negative. Um, and so it took a little time to learn that. And the last, mm, I guess it's been 10 years ago, almost 9 years ago, I finished my PhD. And in my PhD, I did the research that led to this book called Deliberate Creative Teams. And specifically, what I was curious about is why is it that some teams that I had been on were highly creative, and then some teams I had been on were like uncreative, just the opposite of creativity. I felt less creative when I stepped into the room almost. And early in my career, I worked at a university. So sometimes these teams like were committees where there would be some overlap of members. So I'm like, okay, it's not about the individual members. Um, so it's more about there's something else going on. I was very curious what that was. So I dug deep into the research and I ended up going pretty far with it. Wrote this book. Here, I'll just stick this up again if you're curious about the book. And so, what I'm going to teach you today, we're going to go into a couple of activities that are in the book. I know you all are trainers, most of you at least, and we're going to get into some of those activities. So, what I'm curious before we go much further is I would love for you to open up the chat and I would love for you to write two things all in one response. So, those two things are I love knowing where people are from or where you are right now in the world. So, put that and also put what type of work do you do? Or like, who are you working with? Like, do you teach leadership development to college students? Or are you teaching customer service to healthcare employees? Like, whatever it is you do, throw that in the chat so I can kind of frame and make this a bit more specific to you. And I happen to be in Asheville, North Carolina, if that helps. So throw that in the chat. Where are you from? And then what type of groups do you work with? And what do you do? Awesome. All right, this is super helpful. Got people from, I think we're getting about almost every US time zone. Florida, Virginia, Maryland, Kansas, California, Missouri, Tennessee, New Mexico, Madison, Wisconsin. Hi, Terry.
And
Um,
such a range of what people focus on in their training, which is
yeah.
so cool. What a great group we are. Go us.
I'm impressed with the diversity. Yeah, we've got HR, customer service, student affairs, foster care. All right, this is super cool. Okay, so whatever it is that you do, I want you to keep that in mind and thinking about how can you apply this to your work. So the first thing is in a moment, so I want you to think about this question here, which is in a moment, I'm going to give you, we're going to do an activity, but I want you to think about this question of what is one thing that helps you be creative when you're working in a team? And we're going to do this activity that I created called Climer cards, which Sue just mentioned a few minutes ago. And let me just show you what this will look like. In a moment, I'm going to put a link in the chat, and you're going to see, once you go to that link, you'll see a web page that looks like this. And at the top of the screen, you'll see this question or this prompt. Select a card that represents one thing that helps you be creative in a team. You're going to scroll down, pick whichever that thing is, type in your name, and then a sentence or two of why you chose that card. So, how does that image represent one thing that helps you be creative in a team? And then you'll hit create response. And once you do, you'll be able to see everybody else's response. So, I'm going to go
And I just
ahead.
want to also say, Amy and I talked about all of this before, and I think it's really interesting and helpful that as we go through this session, we're going to be able to think about not just experiencing the tools and the creativity on our own, but thinking about both how we can teach creativity as well as implement it on our own terms with the folks who we work with. So we're sort of looking at it from those dual positions, which I think is, I appreciate.
Great. All right, the link is in the chat, so go ahead and click on that. Or I will actually put my screen back up if you prefer to use a separate device. There's a QR code there on the screen. And if you want to like pull out your phone or something, you can do it from that separate device.
I like that.
And those of you that have your video on, give me just like a head nod or a thumbs up if it looks like the technology's working. Okay, thanks, Daryl. All right, responses are coming in. Excellent. Once you've entered your response, feel free to take a moment and read other people's responses. Mm. Oh, these are great. Y'all keep them coming. All right, I'm going to give another piece of direction. In a moment, you're going to go into a breakout room. And once you get in that breakout room, you're going to take each person will have about 1 minute and share which card you selected and why. So, what helps your team be more creative? And share for about a minute. In Zoom, there's a timer on the top of the screen that'll kind of keep you honest there. And that's don't go too long, but also fill that minute. You could answer this question in 15 seconds, but fill that minute. After everyone has shared, stay in your room and continue talking until we bring you back. We're going to give you like 4.5, 5 minutes here in the room. You'll have about 3 people in your room. All right, we are going to send everyone into breakout rooms. Welcome back. How are your conversations? Good. I see thumbs up. Thanks, Sherry. How are your conversations as you just joining? Awesome. Double thumbs up. Lots of
Good.
thumbs up. Good to see you all back. All right. So, I wanted to share this technique because it is a great way to get people talking about a particular topic, but very different reaction than if you just ask the question without using the card. So, what I love to do is just open it up for a couple comments, and I want to know how do you feel like the this activity of using the climber cards to respond, how did that change your conversation? So not necessarily interested in what you said and what you talked about, but once you want to get a little meta here and think about and talk about what experience was like because of the cards. Anyone want to, you can throw your response in the chat, you can raise your hand, either virtual or physical. Anyone willing to share? Anna says super fun. Sam says great conversation. Any other thoughts about how the cards shifted the conversation? Nicole says it's easier to connect. Awesome. I see
I
some.
can share.
Yeah, Mary, go for it. Or is that
Okay.
Sam?
Yeah, I thought we had a good group. We had two folks in our group who chose the part, and the way that they explained it was very insightful. I really hadn't. It's hard to see some of these. Of course, we're doing this very fast. It's hard to see some of these images and sort of pull it back to what your style and how you do it. But once they explained that, it really kind of brought something else out in me as well. Anyway,
Mhm.
it was very insightful.
Awesome. Love it. A couple other comments in the chat. Oh, Nora, go for it.
I consider this right brain food, the images. And anyone will tell you who's seen me on this scene before is I love cards. And if you give me something to manipulate, something to hold, something to show and hold up, it's a winner as far as I'm concerned. It gets people to be engaged, it gives them something to do. So I think the climber cards are a winner on all those levels, but mostly the metaphor idea. We all had to make up something that went with that picture. So that's what I love about them.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm kind of in a way like kind of pushing you to be a little bit creative. And we're talking about creativity, so some layers there. Yeah, thanks, Dora. Lots of good comments in the chat.
I think it also makes you think more deeply about what your experience is and what you want to share. So it's not just about explaining it, but it sort of, I don't know, brings ideas to the forefront that you may not have, that may not have been on the tip of your tongue if you were just asked to answer the question without it.
Yeah, and I think that's a great segue. That one of the things that when I talk with trainers, they ask me a lot. How do I get the group to talk, or how do I get my team to talk? Whether they're a trainer, most of you are doing more training, or if they're a team leader and like they're not really a trainer, but they got to facilitate a lot. And when I ask them, like, well, what are your conversations like? How are you facilitating? They often just say, well, I just throw a question out and then I'm, opening it up for a response. And I feel that's like kind of one of the least effective ways, depending on the team. I mean, some teams, like, they're going to thrive in that. But often what happens is in a team of 10, you have three or four people that they talk the first, they're the first to share. And just because like they've thought of their response soon enough. And then there are three or four people that like hardly ever share. And it was so interesting looking at these responses. Whoops, if I show up or throw these up on the screen, so the question was, what helps you be more creative in a team? And MSJ says, when I have time to think by myself. And this activity is giving everyone just a minute, not a lot of time, but just enough to think about a response, which makes it then so much easier to share within the full group. And obviously, you can do this virtually. You can do this in person if you have the physical cards. You can use the virtual version in person if people have devices. Um, there's a lot more on this, and I think I don't know if the recordings, Sue, are available, but I have done a workshop for Trainers Warehouse on Climber cards, so you can go back and look at that if you're interested.
For sure.
But let's just transition, and we only have about 10 more minutes, and I want to just share a couple other quick activities specifically about creativity. If you're trying to get teams to be more creative, there are some techniques that you can use, and the biggest thing I'm going to ask you to do is stop leading brainstorming sessions. That might sound unusual from someone who leads a lot of ideation sessions, but there's an important distinction there. So first I want to share, and we've touched upon this a little bit, but I want to make sure you all see that what we know about creativity, there's a few important things. And first of all is that we all have incredible creative potential. As humans, it is so deep ingrained in us, but the important distinction here is that it is a skill. And it is a skill you can get better at and learn and practice just like any other skill. And I feel like in the last 50 years in our culture, at least in the US, we've done a really good job, or I would say a reasonably good job of teaching that leadership is a skill and you can become a better leader over time if you practice, if you get feedback and reflection. Creativity is the same thing, but we often don't think of it that way. And in my work, this has become my mantra. Be deliberate to be creative because it will not happen by accident. And this is one of the biggest mistakes I see organizations make is they think creativity is just going to happen magically. And we could get into talking more about like all the myths that we hold and stuff, but we won't do that today. For right now, I want you to think about a team that you are on. So just hold that, or a team that you're about to lead if you're more, you're going to lead a team pretty soon. And I want to share with you just briefly the research results that I found of the three things that impacts team creativity. And these are them. Teams need to have a clear shared purpose. They need to have strong team dynamics, and they need to know and use a creative process. Now, most of you, if you're trainers, you're probably very familiar with the work around team purpose and team dynamics. And so we're not going to talk about those today. You can definitely dig into them in this book if you're curious, my new book, which we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But I want to dig into this idea of team creative process and give you just a couple little simple techniques you can use to bring creativity out in in the clients or in the groups that you're working with. All right. So the first is when you're in a moment and you're like looking at an issue, a problem, you're trying to come up with some creative ideas, the way you phrase the problem or the challenge impacts the type of ideas you get. So I would say it is worth at least 5 minutes. Like research has shown, if you spend 5 minutes clarifying what the problem is, you will get more creative results. And then you want to be very intentional about how you describe the problem. Because what happens is sometimes we think the problem is over here, but after we talk about it, it's actually over here. And so asking some clarifying questions, what's going on? What do we need to know? What have you already tried? Get all that down, maybe scribe it. 5 minutes, helpful. Bigger problems, I would recommend more time. But then I would recommend changing the way you write. Instead of saying, what should we do? Or what could we do? Or what do we need to do to solve this problem? All of those questions imply you are looking for the right answer, which will decrease the creative results because everyone's trying to get it right. And unfortunately, due to our education system, we have been taught that there is a right answer for most things, which is not true. But instead, I want to encourage you to use the phrase, how might we? So how might we redesign our programs to get more engagement is a very different question than how should we redesign our programs to get more engagement. And I like to say that might is a mighty word. There's a lot of power in this little word. So if you do nothing else, in fact, I would encourage you, today's Thursday, between now and the end of day tomorrow, Friday, see if you can ask questions using how might we or how might I, depending on what's appropriate, at least 5 times. It works remarkably well with teenagers, with spouses. It will change your entire dynamic. So try that out. And if you have a question right now or a challenge right now you're pondering, you might even take a moment and rewrite it on a scrap piece of paper as a how might we question.
I love
All
that
right.
you did that, Amy, also because I mean, I think a lot of people on the call know that we create a lot of these question balls, these thumb balls that we have.
Mm,
And we're always very careful about the how might you, how could you, as opposed to what would you do? Or what's, not what's the right answer, but how do you think about this?
yeah.
How do you get started?
So the thumb ball questions, there's a lot of how might we questions.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. On all of them, we go through, I'm like, no, not should, not.
Love it. Nice. All right. So you got a how might we question, you've posed it to your team, and now you want to generate some ideas. Another mistake I see is that leaders, facilitators will say, okay, let's do some brainstorming. What do you got? Let me hear the ideas, like throw them out there. So two mistakes with that. One is, which we already mentioned, you're not giving people time to think. And two, you're making assumptions that they understand what brainstorming is and how it works. So the first thing is you want to give them some guidelines around brainstorming. It is worth taking 5 minutes to talk about uh, some rules around generating ideas. And I know that seems counterproductive or counterintuitive. Like, why would we have rules for creativity? I thought it was about letting go of rules. Actually, parameters help people be more creative. So there's four parameters or four guidelines when you're trying to generate ideas. The first is um, suspend judgment. So that includes judging yourself, but suspend judgment. Now, the key word is suspend. We are going to judge these ideas. That is very important. We want to judge ideas, right? There are bad ideas in the world that we don't want to move forward, but you're just suspending that judgment for a few minutes. Then you're going for combining and building on ideas. So Nora shares an idea, Mary shares an idea, and then Jamie says, "Ooh, what if we take those two and we do this?" And now that's where like the collaboration really gets exciting. The third is you want to go for wild, wacky ideas. Yeah, that idea that involves like the collaboration with the local zoo. Yes, bring that in. Um, Not that you might do that, but it might spur something else. And it's worth like getting a little wacky. And then finally, we're going for quantity because quantity leads to quality. So the more ideas you get, the more likely you're going to get good ideas. I was recently talking with a colleague, like a kind of somebody I recently met, and we were talking about creativity, and she said, "Oh my gosh, in our team, we always go with the first idea. Whoever shares an idea, we just go with it." I was like, "Wait, what? What if it's a bad idea?" And she's like, "I don't know. It never occurred to us to keep going." So I was really surprised by that. But it's pretty easy to get a lot of ideas in 5 minutes. So let me show you a quick technique on how to get ideas in 5 minutes, which I thought I had a slide for and I don't. But everybody gets some Post-it notes. Give everyone like half of a pad and set a timer for about 3 to 5 minutes. You've posed the how might we question. You've already talked for a couple minutes about those ideas, about what the issue is, and then just say, write down your ideas on this Post-it, the Post-its, one idea per Post-it, suspending judgment, anything goes, 3 minutes. Most people can get at least an idea a minute. Some people will be more prolific and can get 2, 3 ideas a minute. And then you just go around and share. If you do that one thing, you will have more ideas than you would ever have doing the classic brainstorming technique. All right. I realize it is 30 past the hour, and the format here is we're going to pause for a bit and ask some questions or open it up for questions. I'm sticking around to the top of the hour. Before I open it up for questions, though, I just want to throw out, if you are interested in digging deeper into what I've talked about today, I'm just like throwing a bunch of ideas at you. This is my new book. You can check it out. It's only been out for about 3 weeks. It's the responses I'm getting from it has been just actually amazing, really heartwarming. I've been pleasantly shocked.
And what I've told Amy privately is that what I've enjoyed about her book is that it's not a collection of her blog posts. It's based on her research and stories
That's
and
true.
has the overall perspective, but as you're going through right now, specific strategies that you can use to build creativity on your team. And I've been enjoying it. So
Thank you, Sue. I appreciate that.
yeah.
Yeah, it's been really fun. Once you do buy the book, there's a link inside the book for some more freebies, some various activities. And one of the things that I'm doing that I'll just share because I know some of you work with teams right now, or are on a team, is that I have all these bulk bonuses right now happening through April 9th, just as part of the launch, that if you buy at least 3 or more books, there's all sorts of extra stuff you get. And these could be for gifts, they could be for your team, they could be 3 separate orders all at once. It doesn't matter. Do whatever works for you. But all the details are on that website, and I'll throw that in the chat as well. All right. We just like breezed through a
We
bunch.
through a lot, but we wanted to leave, and I know we sort of say a half hour and we always kind of stay on, but I didn't want to monopolize your whole the whole hour. So let's chat. If you have time to stay on for a
Oh,
little bit,
absolutely.
let's ask questions, and I'm sure Amy can go a little bit deeper on any of these ideas for us.
Yeah.
You're welcome to either unmute yourself or type into the chat. But we'd
Oh,
love to.
Nora, I see your comment there. Could you re-show the triple circle a couple slides ago? Yes, let me go back to that. There it is. If you want to take a screenshot, you're welcome to. Here, let me spotlight it so it's big. What other questions are on your mind?
Are the cards on your website, Amy?
Yeah, let me put the website up there if you want to learn more about them. You can also
Mm-hmm.
buy them at Training Wheels. In
Trainer's
fact,
Warehouse.
sorry, total
You
faux
mean,
pas
I
there.
think
You can buy them at Trainer's
Trainer
Warehouse.
Wheels also has them. I'm gonna put on the
Yeah,
Clamor
put the
cards
link
on
in
our
there, Sue.
set.
Actually, Trainer's Warehouse, I believe, is one of the few places in the country that has deck number 2. Do you have deck 2, Sue?
We do. I'll put
I
both.
don't have any. I'm out of stock. So if you want deck 2.
Oh, do we have some? Have some. I'll check stock next.
Okay, yeah, make sure. Daryl, I love Trainer's Warehouse. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that was the first.
Other questions, other thoughts?
Amy, do you have, like, as I'm sort of thinking about my team here, I guess I'm thinking about like people who don't necessarily see themselves as not just creative, but as part of a team to sort of take on that role of, let me think strategically about something. Like they may be more, typically administrative roles or purchasing roles, or someone who isn't necessarily in that role. And is it appropriate or inappropriate? Like, how do you think about bringing people in who may not be comfortable with just sort of being part of something like that?
So you're saying that like there are team members, maybe because of their role, they don't feel as comfortable as a team member, or they don't see themselves as a team
Yeah,
member?
I think they don't see themselves as playing that role of, contributing in that way or having enough information to be helpful.
Mm.
Um,
I think it's like so much in how you frame it. And so let's say you wanted to, you're having a challenge and you want to get everyone's input, and you feel like that this is the type of challenge where we need input from across the organization. I think you can frame it that way. And actually, what happens is often it's the people who are like frontline staff or who aren't, at the leadership level, they're going to have ideas that those at the leadership level wouldn't have, and vice versa, of course,
exactly. Yeah.
right? Um, I do find that using something like this post-it note technique, it helps like equalize things.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of times if people are invited in to share their ideas, but they're not used to that, they don't know each other, and they're asked to just verbalize them, there's a lot of concern about judgment. And when you put in the post-it notes, I mean, you don't even necessarily, depending on how you set it up after, you may or may not even know who wrote them. You can just have them up all the wall. Sometimes I'll have people read them out, read their own out. But then, particularly once they're up there, like no one's tracking who said what, or at least
Right.
that's been my experience.
Yeah.
So when there's like that anonymity, that can really help, I think.
Mm. I was also just going to mention that I think, and I said this to you before when we were prepping for today, that the idea of creative abrasion, like the fact that having different ideas, and it comes to the example that you said that we just take the first idea. Like having differences in perspective and thought is actually really healthy and helpful. And it gives people kind of a way. And I think also when you say that at the outset, that can also be helpful in terms of setting expectations for what people can hope to achieve.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, laying it out like, hey, we need your input. Because of your role, we need your input. Because of who you are, we need your input.
Yeah.
And yeah, making sure they feel welcomed.
Amy, can you throw in a link to the virtual
Oh, yeah.
tool? Because we don't have that on our
Yes.
site right now. I'm kind of curious for the group also, if as you're thinking about this, and it's something I raised at the beginning, do you think about using the tools more within your team or for teaching creativity